A common rule about how all our boards work from Q to SQ, is we have what's called a green select button, and when you press that select button, you begin working on the channel that is selected. So it's gate, it's compressor, it's EQ, mic pre attributes. In the case of Avantis, because we're saving hardware and giving you better than a scribble strip across the bottom, that button is the bottom of the console. So the select button is the little block at the bottom of the screen. And when you choose a channel to work on, you're highlighting it in this banked view. And notice when I go over to the far right of the console, it is selecting separately. So you can operate the console split, or I can work on each side separate processing, or I can actually have them stitched together. So when I press the select button on one channel, I can have a compressor pop up here and a gate pop up there. That's a user's choice. I can kind of show you when we get to that half of things, but right now they're operating independently. What you see in the upper left and the upper right is your panic mode of understanding what's selected and where it's mixing. A lot of times if you're mixing on digital consoles, older generation people were freaked out by not knowing what was selected on what layer, what the heck the fader position is, sends on fader. And all Allen Heath, you actually have a visual cue at all times. So upper left, you see kick selected, that's the processing. And where is that kick drum if I mix its fader going to? It's going to the mains. Notice if I come over here, that changed to drummer. So that's always a visual cue of what's selected and where it's mixing to or from. So as I press the mix buttons on my 4 output buses. By the way, this is kind of just like a little simple club gig programming. I've got 18 inputs across 2 layers on the left side. On the right side, I've made a master section that has 4 DCAs, 3 effect turns, my mains kind of in the middle, and then 4 aux sends from front of house, serving bass, drummers, guitar, keys. So just to kind of make it easy. You can get as phenomenally pretzel bent on the programming and layout of this console as you want. I will show you how to do that shortly. In fact, it's mind-blowing. Older people didn't like Allen Heath prior to COVID. And like I said, that's when the younger generation kind of moved up because our stuff was too programmable. It's like, wait a minute, you could have a master fader right here. What? Who wants that? I want to know that my augs are here, my groups are there, DCA, brr, 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 We're aging out, You're coming up. So you press the select button, which in this case is like the scribble strip on the bottom of the screen. And I can either now tap on one of these icons to explode that individual signal process, which I will do at the very top, which brings me to the first of several tabs moving left to right. This is the direction of audio, by the way. So your parametric EQ is in front of the compressor, et cetera, and so forth. And we'll kind of look at each of these and how to run them, just as sort of a guidance training on how to work the console. This may not be news for you because you've been mixing on one for a while, but when I get into programming, maybe you'll pick up some cool stuff. It will be new for these other folks. So there are a lot of empty boxes. Why is that? Well, my source of this audio is coming from a Dante card, which is coming from that MacBook, piping in 18 tracks of a Ray Charles session. There is no mic pre-control. 48 volt phantom power is a product of the fact that that particular channel isn't plugged into a mic pre. So that's why the boxes are empty. If you go down to layer E and then tap the first input there, you will notice a couple things. Your gain just popped up. I've got scene recall. I can exempt that individual channel. I can activate a pad. I can activate phantom power, but you got to press and hold it for a second. And by the way, small feature, starting about 8 or so years ago, all Allen Heath digital consoles duck the audio while phantom power volts up. So no more or pops. And we've all done that. Not as beginners, you forget. Okay, somebody plugged in an 87, phantom power. But you do have to press and hold it for about a second so you mean it. The other thing you may have noticed is that encoders here just went from yellow to red. So red means mic pre, gain. If I go back up to layer A and tap the kick drum, you'll see that all the encoders went to yellow. Yellow is digital trim. And in digital trim, now all these boxes are empty. I have plus or minus 24 dB to play with if I lock down my mic pre's and I live in digital trim. That could be useful in multi-console scenarios where you got front of house monitors, front of house broadcast monitors. You know, one console is going to set the gains, lock them down, and if everybody else needs to compensate for the obnoxious keyboard player that cranked himself 18 dB for his solo, they can all handle it separately, right? Because that happens. If you haven't noticed, it's tap and turn the numeric value, and you can use the BFK, the big fat knob, to change things. So there will be other ways of adjusting things on different screens. One of the other empty boxes, which we don't have a means of populating for you, would accommodate your Sennheiser or Shure wireless. So I think the E3 and the higher versions of Sennheiser wireless, when it comes to Shure, it's Axient Digital, QLXD, and ULXD, can all have their batteries and RF strength displayed for you in bank view. Do you guys use wireless?
Yeah, we have ULXD.
Are you seeing it in the console?
No.
We can help you set that up. I mean, especially just for the battery strength, right? That's killer.
But I have another menu where we had Sennheisers connected to it. You could see the Sennheiser battery light.
Yep, it's a wonderful thing. Are you riding your audio in by way of, from the wireless? Is it coming in by Dante, or you plug it into XLRs?
Dante.
Okay, so very common in corporate and institutional installations. Touring people, no way. Because the mic preamplification circuitry in that handheld or body pack is not the same preamp that you're going to find in front of our DACs. But you're mainly spoken word. All right, so probably anybody that matters would never hear a difference. So in this area is where we would access control and channel programming of your Sennheiser. Also, small feature from within this, if I tapped on that, I could blow into another screen, which would allow me to attenuate the receiver from the console if you want. So that data from the Shure and Sennheiser stuff can ride on the Dante wire. You basically just need to activate it. Or you can go LAN port to LAN port and do it that way if you're not using Dante or you just want to use a separate wire. Okay, first in line of signal processing is high and low pass filter. I can be a millennial and touch the screen, or I can tap and turn numeric values. I gotta make sure my arm isn't blocking you guys. Ooh. You have 4 different slopes here for the high pass, 12, 18 or 24 dB Butterworth, and a 18 dB Bessel. This is a little different contour. The high and low pass will show on the parametric screen as well, but it's essentially tap and turn or grab the little dot to grab the frequency you want. Next in line is a gate. So notice that little histogram running. This is a useful tool. As you've probably known throughout your short or long careers, gate activity is usually displayed or demonstrated by a blinking LED or a meter crossing a threshold where you know the gate's opening and closing. This histogram is showing you more of that. I'm blind between the projector and the dark curtain here. This is showing you the behavior of the gate. So how fast it opens, how long it stays open, and how fast the release time, right? That's why you see a little swoop, a little swoop. And notice when I turn it off, it's still operating. Remember I said every possible thing on this console is running under the hood whether you use it or not? That's kind of a demonstration of that. I'm not using that gate, but the math is still happening according to whatever generic settings are on the threshold, attack, and release. If you're really good, this is sort of a stupid side story my rep has heard me tell a million times, because I came up as a club engineer in Hollywood. How many drummers don't tune their rack toms? You know? You hit it and it's like, boom. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to put a gate on it. And they hate knowing that because that's my sound, man. You put a gate on me, well, tune your drum, you dummy. I'm kidding. Aren't you a drummer, Ira?
I'm not saying nothing.
Oh, that guy. Oh, yeah. He cranked up the, never mind. Anyway, if you get good at understanding and reading this histogram, which is obviously closed at the moment, you could kind of dial in, the curve and the attack release time visually and then just whoop, turn it on, turn it off. All right, dumb side story. Yes, there's sidechain keying on there. The first insert point, you have two, one before and after the compressor and gate. This is where I'm going to insert outboard gear, a plugin from a SoundGrid server or what have you. I just declare where the send and return points are coming and going in the console. This is also where I choose to apply the Dyne 8, which is the multi-band compressor dynamic EQ. So if I tap the pull down list, I can see the sockets and number sockets once I choose them, but top of the list after unassigned is Dyne 8. And if you tap the number here, you'll see you've got 16 of them. That's if you have DPAC. I can drop this on any input or bus. I'm going to hit apply now. And you see a composite of the multiband and the dynamic EQ running, but you can affect change on them separately by tapping these tabs. Now, what we've given people, and they kind of go, whoa, that's cool. If you've ever dialed in one of these frequency-dependent processors, you can be distracted by the highs and lows that are happening around. You're kind of looking for that frequency. Look what I can do. Our consoles have this sort of scope-targeted ability to cue things. So if you press and hold listen, and you tap one of those four blocks, this is going to become illuminated. Now in your ears, you're listening to just the low-mid frequency of that multiband compressor. Everything else is defeated. Gate, compressor, which is kind of neat. It allows you to do those surgical changes. And up top here is a little flashing set of cans. Now, if I'm in the middle of something at sound check, I get distracted. Oh, I got to go to another layer here and choose something else. And then I got to be another layer here. Uh-oh, beware, right? That's telling you there's a unique state of queuing happening somewhere. Now I can do one of two things. I can go back up to that layer, oops, and find it, or I can just tap that flashing headphone and it clears that state of queuing. This also works in the bank view. Actually, it works in several views, but like if I close out this window and I just want to cue up the parametric EQ of the kick drum because there's a honk at 200 hertz and the gate and the compressor are affecting it. So in the old days, analog console, you'd have to yank the insert out, put your headphones on and listen, right? Now I can just press and hold listen, tap the parametric EQ, and I'm listening to just that dry audio. So I can make some changes to it. And again, flashing headphones, tap it to clear it. You can do that all over the console on buses, inputs, matrices, whatever. Just press and hold listen and tap what you want to target in on. So it's a neat little scope. So we've got that inserted before the parametric. Next in line is the parametric. And once we get some audio passing back through here, you're gonna see the RTA that we underlay that we now include on the screen view. It's become very popular to want to see RTA activity on inputs and outputs, so we added that. Now the parametric, if we go back to parametric settings, yes, you have 4 full bands of parametric. The outer bands can be shelves or additional high pass if you want, if you tap these guys. It's my arm blocking you. And your frequencies out of the box, let's put a cut on this guy. Let's make it narrow. Oops. Notice that I can only sweep it to 200 hertz. Well, what if I want a few more frequencies higher up? If you go to options, and by the way, this little section over here at the bottom of these, if you tap that, it can also be metering if you want. So some people don't realize there are 4 more buttons there. If I want to tweak something, there's all over this console. Yep.
What's that? One question. So is this metering? It's only for the master bus?
Could be.
Okay, but you can also do it for the whatever.
Yeah, I believe so. If we get into surface prefs or in the metering section. But in that 4 buttons underneath the meter or sideways are 4 more things. You can press the help button, which pops up all these little balloons, or what do they call them in cartoon era, which you can tap at, look at, and clear. Or I press and hold options. Where was I? Parametric. Okay, press and hold options. You see these 2 things with gears on them? Poke all the way around this console. When you press and hold options, there's some little secret thing you can do. And this will all happen while the console is running without affecting audio. I'm going to tap that. And now I can see that I have the ability to take that input to full range as opposed to being truncated by low, mid, high highs. So if I hit full range, and I can do it just for this one channel or the whole desk, I tap outside the pop-up to clear it. Now you will see if I hit the frequency, I can sweep this all the way up to 20K. So out of the box, it comes bracketed. If you want to slide frequencies beyond their brackets, you have to unlock them with that little options gear. Okay, so I turn it off. You can have color fill or not, it's up to you. Just one little place where you can look for little additional things. Also, you noticed up top, there's a little green bar with a gear as well. If I tap that, I can swap the order of the parametric and compressor. Something studio people like to do. I never personally wanted to do that live, but some people like to do that, so I can just swap them. And now you see that there's a little arrow between them showing sort of an altered state of than standard. And I can do that for one channel, or I can make it do that for the whole desk. Okay, next in line is our compressor. Again, you have a little histogram that shows you the signature of compression that's happening. If I go to a DBX 160, it becomes a whole lot more aggressive. And we don't say that in writing, right? Oops. So there is a different flavor of compression. Watch if I go to the Optronic. This becomes a lot more gentle. Very slow, right? You can see why that LA2A was favored on vocals and subtle things, bass and whatnot. So that little histogram, and again, you turn it on, you turn it off, you can see that the work is happening under the hood. A lot of options. We also have a ducker in there for paging. Would you ever want use of a ducker for emergency or paging purposes?
Yeah, sometimes I use it when I have a MC speaking and
Okay.
there's music in the background.
Yep.
Give music to duck.
So that was added several years ago. There are several compressor models in here. The 1176, again, there's like a 15-minute story between each of these, but you have a silver face and a black face version, 1176. People ask if we're ever going to do the purple one. That was the last version, I think, in the early 90s or late 80s that came out. And I don't know, but maybe. So I'm just going to go back to a generic one. Again, all of these have emulations that you can hear little stories on. There's some place on YouTube where Dr. Rob talked about, this one came from Abbey Road Studios and this one came from wherever in Paris. You have a button here called parallel path. Does everybody know what parallel compression is? Yes, yes, yeah. Okay. Most people create that and they call it a crush group. For example, you want your drums going to a stereo group where they get compressed, but you also send the drums dry. I'll use the example of a kick drum where I used to do parallel compression manually with bike splitters. You have one channel that's going to the mains, right? And the second channel, I'd run to a mono audio subgroup and I'd apply a gate and compressor, or maybe just a severe compressor, and blend the two. So I hear an open papery sound. That's called a crush group. And most people are used to doing that. And particularly the early Avid, SC48s profiles, you would hear the out of phasedness of what was going through two buses, not going out the back door at the same time. And it was annoying, and people lived with it. This has parallel path built in. Every channel, you can do a dry and wet blend on every bus or every input. And some people don't realize that. That's kind of a neat little utility. Now, if you want to do a whole horn section, obviously you're not necessarily going to use that. But you could take the horn section to a subgroup by itself and then blend your wet and dry, right? You don't have to take it to the mains and blend it with a crush group. But again, that audio path will often result in stuff being out of alignment, out of phase. Every bus summing scenario in our console is accounted for in that phase delay compensation spec of 0.68 milliseconds. You have an insert point behind the parametric and compressor and input offset delay tweaks if you want. And you can regulate these units if you hit that options button again. We can be looking at feet, milliseconds, meters, samples. I heard a couple of years ago people were wanting frames for video purposes. I don't know why that's not there or if they're still looking at it, but they said they were looking at it. And by the way, notice this little pop-up window doesn't have apply or OK or a little X. Yet the larger pop-up has an X. This is an inconsistency across DLive and Avantis I don't have an explanation for, but how to get out of this screen is just to tap on the outside of it. And again, it clears it. So just be aware, there are sometimes different ways to exit. Now I've got an X up here that I can clear. It's weird. Output signal processing is not much different. I'm going to go over to AUX 1 here, and we'll look at the right side of the console, and if I hit the processing tab below it, I can see I have an opportunity to drop an external input on the bus, not going through an input channel. I have a single insert point before the parametric. The parametric is as was before on the other one. All right, now we added not only the 4 graphic EQs that we talked about, right? And you can see their filter cuts, how they're a little different as I cycle through these. Notice a wider shoulder. That DN360 has the tightest slice. That's why we all liked that back in the day. I think they still sell them for like $1,250. That's DBX blue. But we recently added a 5th tab that gives you 3 more sets of 4 parametric. So 12 more bands of parametric along with the 4 that you originally had. That's 16 bands of parametric to make little sliver slices on misbehaving lavalier mics or something, right? So we call that NEEQ. NEQ, I think it's a riff on phonics or something. We're like, why NEQ? Well, it's NEQ, mate. Whatever.
I thought it was notch.
What?
Yeah, I thought the N was for notch.
Maybe. NEQ library. So any of our signal processing, I haven't mentioned this along the way, can have its own little library storing of its settings if you want to recall them onto other things on other days. There is a way to save an entire channel strip or output bus, and that is by tapping on the thing that's selected. You know, you got this little green flag up here. Let's go here. This is a little different than DLive. In this screen, I can change the color of something individually. There are other places to change the colors as well, but I can do that if I want. And you have this channel library there. So if I name this Jennifer's kick drum, she's got a killer DW that I've just dialed in beautifully, and I want to save the whole channel strip after the mic pre, you know, comp, gate, EQ, everything. I can save whole channel strips here by tapping that little flag, okay? I can copy and paste mixes too, which I'll show you in a second, but copy, paste, reset for people who've come up on, again, I don't like to brand bash, but Yamaha people usually kind of go, whoa, when I show them this. It's so easy on our console. I want to copy that parametric EQ to, let's say I'm setting up a bunch of lavs. I've got a favorite starting point. The talent's not there yet, but you know, you've been around the block. So I'm going to start out with that EQ, and I want to copy. Look over here at these 3 buttons, copy, paste, reset. Press and hold copy, tap your parametric, press and hold paste, and boom, boom, boom. Voila. You want to wipe out that, hit reset. If you want to copy and paste the entire channel strip after the mic pre, press and hold copy, tap the little scribble strip section on the bottom, press and hold paste, and I can do like so. I want to zero out a channel, just press reset, and you're done. You can reset these individually or the whole channel across the bottom. Let's talk about the encoders. All your encoders are yellow. That's the gain indication. Yellow is actually digital and red is preamp. If you look at these 6 buttons over here, I have the option of displaying gain. I can make those globally, the encoders can be pan pots now. You can see that, right? Unlike DLive, I can just tap here and use my BFK, big fat knob, be nice, to do pan as well. But this is globally adjusting, having these encoders just serve as gain adjustments. If you don't like the behavior that we call sends on fader, right? And you want to defeat that, you can have your encoders be your aux sends as well. So if I press sends, you'll notice that this is going to zero out. Oops. The faders are now back to mixing to mains, and now my encoders adopt the color of the bus that I've colored blue. That's why they're blue. And now this is sends level to that bus whose mix button I have selected. So notice faders aren't moving anymore, but your encoder levels are managing the send level. So those are the 3 presets of the encoders. I can actually now add 3 user-defined things across the bottom. If you press user key 1, you will see that I have set that up to be 4 bands of parametric control. So you don't have to go to the parametric. You can actually use your brain by looking at the mathematic values, right? Something we haven't done since the old analog days. But let's be enamored by the pretty cartoon picture. And we can see now that this actually does, in fact, operate the parametric EQ. So you have 4 sets of gain, width, and frequency. The second button, user definable, I've set up to operate both the compressor and gate. So let's go to the gate, over here, and we will see that I'm affecting change on it, the depth of it. So this is just a fast access way of having that signal processing right under your nose if you want it or not. It splits the scribble strip in half. And then the last one I have set, is it programmed? Okay, this is, I think, yeah, I have it set to be a high pass filter. There's a little menu of additional things that these encoders can be on those 3 user. Like it could be, I think it could be an input direct IO level if you want. Thresholds for certain things. These little encoders on the right side of the screens also can be user defined, and when we get into programming the console, I'll show you. Right now I've got this set up to be, where's my comp? So this is also compressor control over here on the right side. DLive has 6 encoders, Avantis has 3. And I believe this little flag that comes out can be set up so after 5 seconds it'll go away automatically. Otherwise you can just tap it on, tap it off. So more user definable little things for yourself within your show file that you can contour for your personal use. So gain, yellow is digital trim, red is actual physical mic pre, pan, defeat the sends on surface behavior, and then 3 user definables. That's input processing. Output processing we already went through. Let's talk about copy paste, sends on fader behavior. So right now, without the sends button pressed, and there's somewhere else in the console I can defeat sends on fader like permanently. So it won't come back no matter what, if that's how you want to run it. But right now I'm running sends on fader. This is a little club gig. I've got a band set up. So let's go through sound check right quick. You also have mix buttons. Well, you have them all over the console, don't you? What happens if I press a mix button on an input? Well, if you have time and experience on an X or M32, you will see that they kind of, emulated this behavior of ours, except they have a single select button for processing and mix. We have separate buttons. I hit the mix of the kick drum. These aux sends show the send level from that kick. And snare, and overhead left, right. So you can see that you're doing sound check and it's time to give people on stage monitors. This becomes a very cool way of operating. I select the mix of the kick drum and I say, hey guys, who wants kick? All right, drummer, you. Who wants snare? Definitely nobody. Who wants bass? Well, just the bass player, right? Come on, small jokes, laugh. The point is I can see sends from mix inputs, right? Or sends to a bus. So it's showtime. I'm running audio on the mains. Drummer says, dude, I need more kick. Okay, there you go. Double tap the mix button. It goes back home to mains. Small feature. But valuable if you're buried somewhere else in the console too. I don't know if you noticed, but on the right sides of the console, if you're hitting these mix buttons, you'll see soft keys that are sympathetically being selected at the same time. And what I did was I basically made these top 4 soft keys the mix buttons of the 4 buses. So if I'm down on some other layer, right, I can still, oops, sorry. I am elsewhere on, I have this aux buried. Maybe he's, I'm down on this layer for some reason. And the drummer says, man, I need more kick. I can hit that first, give him more kick, double tap, and it goes home to mains, right? So a common use of soft keys is to have the mix buttons. Remember, did we talk about this yet? Mix buttons firing from my IP controller. Same thing. And by the way, all these buttons can be whatever you want them to be. This can be a tap sync, that could be an all mute, this could be changing to scene 60. You tell these buttons what to be. Right now I've got them set up as 3 different layers. And on the top layer, that's a PFL. On the second layer, when that's now a mix button. And the third layer, that's deploying DCA spills. So you can, very soft programmable. Obviously, I can't do that on here, but I can utilize soft keys the same way. Okay, any sound person setting up a stage? You're doing monitors tonight. You've got a set list. You've got the input list. Probably smart to go ahead and get everybody a basic mix in their wedges or ears before they show up, right? Because you know that like self-conscious, nervous guitar player that shows up with his plywood pedal board? You know, he's the first there. And what does he do when he's done setting up? He's background singing. Hey, check 1, 2. Hey man, I'm singing it tonight. I can't hear myself. I'm freaking out. Well, first of all, dummy, don't blow into a microphone. It's the worst thing you can do to it. People don't know that. That is literally the worst thing you can do to a mic is blow into it. Why do people do that? No.
Not to tap.
Psychologically, it makes sense. When you blow out of your mouth, you don't hear anything. But when that air strikes the diaphragm, it lights up. So you think, that'll tell me if the mic is on. But it is, in fact, a very damaging thing for a little $100 SM58. It's not good. So us sound people go, tap, tap, right? So stop blowing on my mic. I'm gonna give you a mix here. So I'm gonna choose a mix, and I'm gonna set up a basic. Everybody wants kick, everybody wants bass. You know, everybody wants a little of this, background, lead, keyboards. And now I can copy and paste this mix. 1, 2, do. Ready? Copy. Tap the mix. I'm going to go to this mix, hit, hold, paste, and tap it. And now these two are the same. I don't have to go to the mix to paste it, but I just showed you that, look, it pasted. So I'm going to hit paste and tap these other two. And now they're all the same. Most of what you do on these consoles is 1, 2, get it done. You know, D-Live, there are more knobs and buttons, so an S-Class surface is going to be really tactile. You know, arguably we're pushing you more into screen activities. But there are shortcuts and things that can happen fast on the Surface. That's one of them. You know, I want to wipe out all the sends to the different buses for whatever reason. I just press and hold reset, tap the mix button of that bus, and it zeroed it out. In fact, I don't have to go to the bus again to clear it. I just press and hold reset and tap all these blue buttons. Boom, boom, boom. And now they're all zeroed.
So is this only for the send? This is only for sends, right? It's not for the bus processing, correct?
Is copy and pasting?
Yeah.
Correct. I'm only copying and pasting. Now, if I want to copy the entire bus processing, it's the same process as what we just did on the inputs. Choose the bus, copy. So tap this little lower area right there. That's going to copy all the output processing. I top it, paste, boom, boom, boom. If you just want to copy the graphic EQs because you've rung out some wedges, which is also a skill people are losing since so many people work on ears. Do you have any wedge speakers?
Yeah.
Do you ring them out? That's a skill, man, you know, to do it fast and accurately. So if I ring out an EQ to a 58 and it's like offset or in the same position, I'm probably okay copying and pasting that EQ to all the other wedges. You know, if they're different mics or they're different orientations or there's a wall nearby, you may want to ring it out individually. But yes, you would do it exactly the same way. Remember your flags. That's what's channel selected and that's where it's mixing to. If you get other places in the console, those things are always visual cues for what's going on. I'm back to mains. DCA spills. We kind of talked about that, right? The things assigned to a DCA are, it's my arm blocking, is in a written list up here. I have this soft key on the very bottom down here set to arm or disarm the feature of spills. If I disarm it now, the mix button does nothing for a DCA. If I activate DCA spills, now that mix button pulls up the thing assigned to that DCA momentarily and puts it away. There's also a mode of this running for people doing monitors called MCAs. A DCA spill, this is affecting these 4 channels mixing to mains. There's an alternate means of having aux sends mixing to a specific bus. So if you're doing ears or monitors for a large band and you want to get the horn section into the drummer's ears. I can pull up the horns and I'd be mixing just for his or her accent, stereo or mono, whatever. So that's called MCA, Mixed Control Associations. I don't know where that came from. DCA, do you know where the term DCA came from? What's it stand for?
Digitally controlled attenuator.
Is there really an attenuator that's being digitally controlled? Well, VCA is voltage control amplifier, which is physically what the circuit did in older analog consoles. When we went digital, Yamaha, for some reason, decided to change the acronym to DCA. And that's why we all say that now. There is no digitally controlled amplifier. It's just doing what a VCA did, right? And the whole fact that we have DCAs comes from the, well, it's a whole side story, but people used to mix on large analog consoles. They used to mix in subgroups. So you can have all the drums on one subgroup, the horn section on another. That way you're not reaching. Remember those big desks? And the problem was, every time you run audio through that audio summing amp of the AUGs, you're adding a level of noise. So I've got an audio subgroup. You got a big venue with a $500,000 PA that happens to be very low noise, and the console is now hissing the more I add audio circuits to it. So the concept of controlling groups of things, because that's all I'm doing, rather than having them going through an audio subgroup that I'm not using for typical audio subgroup purposes, why not just have them voltage controlled remotely with a fader in a logarithmic relationship, right? So you just assign them to something that is essentially moving the faders for you, but doing it by voltage. So that's kind of where, and we would have seen that coming on smaller and smaller consoles at lower price points, but then the digital revolution happened, thus born the DCA. The benefit of DCAs now is I can assign inputs to them, matrices, anything could be controlled by a fader. Yeah, DCA spills. Let's go into programming, setup. And I like to start with how to lay out the desk. We're going to talk about programming your bus orientation. How many things do you want out of those 40 buses? You can pick and choose singular or stereo, anything to be anything you want. So I don't tell you, you've got 12 aux sends and 12 subgroups, you know, there's 24 buses. Nah, what if I want just 2 audio subgroups, 1 in stereo, and I want 16 aux, 2 in mono? You can do that with this desk. You have freely liquid programmable access. So we go to setup. In all of our consoles, the control tab, the things under it are settings for the tactile surface, and knobs and buttons usually is what we're looking at. The first one we're going to look at is strip assign. So what you see on the bottom is a pictorial example of bank 2 or bank 1, right? Let's go up to the top layer. In their corresponding layers, right? So I hit B, C, D, E, F. And I can put anything I want where I want. This is what pissed people off about our freely programmability back in the old days. Nobody's left-handed here. This is my stupid left-handed routine. Ready? Okay, this can happen in a scene. Changing scenes, I can turn this into a left-handed console. I'm going to go to the mix page. I'm going to take the stereo mains and drag it over to the first fader on the left bank. Then I'm going to hit block select, and I'm going to tap drum through keys and drag them down. And then I'm going to go to DCAs. I still have block select chosen. That's basically first and last and everything in between. I'm going to grab all those 4 DCAs and put them off to here. And then I'm going to go to my effect returns, and I'm going to grab the 2 reverbs and a delay. And by the way, didn't 2 verbs and a delay get most of your work done in the old days? Just saying. So now I have basically, it's not quite a mirror, but I put my masters on the left. You can put anything anywhere you want. People who tour on these consoles and know them, if you ever walk up to their show file, you walk up to their desk and, you know, with permission, look at them, a lot of people have these things pretzel bent into an unrecognizable, unworkable machine that you wouldn't know unless it was yours. You know, which speaks to the magic of being able to contour it to your own personal needs. I'm left-handed. I want my left-handed side over here. Darn it, that's discrimination. You know. All that happened with audio going through the console too. I could have a state of scenes operation, and we're not going to, going into scenes is like a whole class on its own, and I'm not the best at it. But you can have a state of operation where firing a scene from a hotkey would basically invert the layout of the console from one person to another just for a user preference. Or I can have a scene change, just make one change accounting for the fact that I've got a different mic on a different amp tonight. You know, or you can scope and safe and recall things in very theatrical, granular ways. We do have QLab drivers that work for DLive and Avantis as well. But anyway, the sort of point was that this is how you lay the console. You see your attributes and you drag them around, right? So you just drag it where you want it to be, and it lands there. I'm going to reset this. I'm going to go back to inputs, tap 1 through 12. And by the way, where are all the inputs? What happened to them? I'm going to scare them. Oh. They're still here, potentially. They're still here. They're still here. They're still running in the desk. Their inputs, wow, that was cool. That literally like went right over your head like a pole vault or something. This demonstrates a feature of me being able to program stuff coming into the console. Maybe I input gain it, I signal process, I bus it to different places, put it under the control of a DCA, and then swipe it off the desk so nobody can mess with it. You know? Back when I moved to Nashville, I'd get hired to do church sound in some places, and I would see literally board tapes taped over choir mics. You know, the hanging choir mics, those crappy little quarter-inch condenser mics that everybody makes. You know, gone are the days of the 451s and the KM84s, right? Which were wonderful, but these little tiny miniature mics they're so awful in their polar response that they're very finicky about gain before feedback. So people would set them up and would literally tape over all the pots so nobody would touch them. Well, what happened to those 4 kick mics? Remember that were the first 4 channels? Let's say those were 4 choir mics. I got them into the desk, I bust them where they needed to go. They're still assigned to this DCA. Watch this. Boop, there they are. So you can pull them up. You can have stuff going through the desk and either hide it permanently or assign it to a DCA just to harvest up when you need. Younger engineers, totally the thing now on 12 fader. These guys, smaller frame surfaces, they mix by DCA. They don't even really go through layers and get to their channels. They'll have a little sidecar. They'll make hotkeys on the button, pull up DCA groups in front of them. They never go through layers or anything. They just pull them up, do what they need to do, they go away. Pull something up. I mean, I've seen guys that say they don't even program the layers on these. These are more prevalent in small portable touring. These are just starting, obviously. But they mix by DCA. I would be in complete paralysis at that concept, being raised on analog consoles in the 90s. But here are some of the creative things you can do, right? So, where were the kick drums? Well, they're still there. They're just under the hood. I'm going to put these all back. Back they come. Yep, there we go. All right, so that's laying out your resources on the different layers of the desk. You can change fader banks here or here, tactile. By the way, did I show you pre and post AUX assignment? I didn't. I'm done with this, except for this. There's a little button here they put. Notice the right side of your console, the 4 faders are silk screened gray. That can represent a locked section of things that you never want to move if you want. So if I tap it, boom, these 4 faders, as I go through the layers, they're not going to go away. They just stay put. So that's basically tied up those 4 faders to only be the things I put on the top layer. I've effectively gotten rid of 5 times 4 programmable faders in the process, so there's 20 faders that are taken out of the picture, but some people like the idea of a locked section. You can also do that, what we call freeze in layers. Different console companies do it different ways. If you look up here, the 3 buttons, pre, safes, and freeze. If I press and hold freeze, I can tap some things and lock them. You'll see the little writing on the scribble strip. And now when I go down different layers, you'll see that those things, those 3 things, I skipped one, don't change. And if I want to unfreeze, I press and hold freeze, And you see the little padlock is locked. Now I'm going to unlock it. And they're unfrozen. So this idea of locking the 4 faders, you could have done that anyway. But that speaks to the generation who wants to know something's there, don't want to lose it. Okay, X out of that, go back to my top layers. Arming buses to be pre or post and actuating the channels to those buses can be done a couple of ways. If you go, let's go ahead and hit the mix button and the select feature of the first AUX, which is the drum wedge. I think you guys would see it on the bottom layer of your consoles. And then I have a button called Assign. This is another kind of fast button combo take, but go to routing so you can visually see what's going on here. I'm going to push some faders up. So you see the mix in the routing screen, right? And if I tap the pre-post, you'll see that post is purple and green is pre. And also in this screen, I can arm them or disarm them. So on and off. Off is hollow, solid is armed. I can also do this by key combinations too. So with the mix button selected, I press and hold this button Assign in the middle of the console. On you guys, it's off to, I think, the left side. And I tap the mix button, and look, I can individually arm or disarm channels, like so, right? Or, while holding the Assign key, I tap the mix button of the bus I'm working with, and it's all on, all off. Okay? So that's a fast little kind of a shortcut. And then if I want to change them globally or individually as pre or post, I use this pre button over here. So press and hold the pre button, and you can see that I'm changing individual sends to be pre or post to that bus. And if you want to do all of them pre-post, as you probably would if you're using some outboard effects gear, just tap all pre, all post. Okay, so you can do this on the routing screen with those little buttons, or it's faster to just use the kind of button combinations to fast path yourself to on and off. Again, sort of a programming sound check setup function. Okay, go away. All right, let's talk about getting the console into the bus configuration that you want. So it's going to be configuration, mixer configuration. The first thing you want to do with this console when you sit in front of it is you want to decide how many buses you want, right? I need 3 effects ends, I've got 4 mono wedges, and 5 sets of stereo ears. So you go to this screen and you basically tap on the resource that you want, and I'm just going to zero them out. You guys don't need to follow me. But if you look on the far right side, you'll see my fuel gauge is increasing, right? So I'm zeroing everything out. Everything is zeroed. Wait, it only says 38. What's missing? Ah, I have the mains. I'm going to turn them off. So there are your 40 freely assignable buses. In these little ladders, you can turn every bus into what you want, stereo or mono. That's kind of cool liquid architecture. If you hit apply right now, it's taking the desk down. It will pop, right? If you had phantom power. It does a soft reboot. Now, there are output relays on our consoles, so if you just hit the power switch, it's not going to kaboom it. But you do not want to do this during a show, during an event where onlookers are present. Do not. Bus architecture is a hard process coded into the FPGA, and it's got to do a soft boot. It'll take probably maybe 20, 30 seconds. I'm not going to do it now because it'll just waste time, so I'm going to hit cancel. And you can see all the buses came back. You can have your stereo mains be dual fader if you want to. I don't know if that's important. So that's the first thing to get out of the way. The second thing is laying out your console the way you want. We just went through that exercise. Probably the third thing to do in just basic architectural setup is to decide your I/O grid happenings, right? What outputs are going to go to what sockets on the console or stage boxes. And the I/O grid is pretty intuitive, thank goodness, because the prior consoles, it was horrible. It's a basic XY grid, and you can swipe and zoom, right? It's kind of neat. If you ever ran a profile or a SC48, you know, you're sitting there with the arrows on the keyboard, right? So this is kind of cool. It's just swept right in front of you. So what do I want to look at? Let's look at outputs at the moment. And you'll see if you scroll down here, these are the only buses that I had programmed into existence from that last screen. That also showed up here in setup, control strip assignment, like when I went to the mixes, these are the only buses that I have programmed into existence. Even though there are 40 of them, I didn't all program them there, so no sense in your attention being cluttered by unused or unprogrammed buses. So if you just had 2 OGs and mains, that's all that would show up on this screen. Similarly, in the I/O page, these are all the buses I have in existence over here, and they're color-coded according to how I may have set them. Your sources, right now, this is an opportunity to do input direct I/O. So there are 2 basic ways of bifurcating or splitting audio into and out of the desk. We're all familiar what an input direct I/O is. Even the analog consoles, more spendy ones had TRS connectors on top of the XLRs, and I could plug a loom into those and I could use it for recording purposes. I could do a split to a broadcast truck or what have you. I could send the audio the other direction. The problem is, or the optional, the liability might be that the pickoff point of that input direct I/O is after the EQ. Like, I remember a lot of analog consoles in the old days, the input direct I/O would be after the EQ. And if I'm going to a dry tape recorder or disc recorder of some kind, do I want my EQ for that room to be permanently archived on that recording? No. So you had to take it to a service center or go back to the shop, pull the back panel off, and there might be little jumpers that would change it to, okay, right after the mic pre. And what do people mostly use input direct I/Os for? It's to record or to send somewhere else for another purpose. So thankfully in digital consoles, it's an easy button push to go to, for example, routing. I need to choose a channel. And we could choose post preamp, post insert return, post parametric on an input channel. It could be, all of the, notice out of the box it comes, post delay. So you should know if you're going to send that audio somewhere else and you don't want the EQs, gains, and delays and EQs affecting it, you want to change it to post preamp. Okay? That audio is coming into the signal processing of an input channel and getting turned around and going another direction. You can do a digital split that way. There are benefits and liabilities to the alternate way of doing a digital split, which we now include on our I/O grid, and that is called a tie line. This is a cool feature that doesn't reside in not every digital console, but this basically grabs, let's say, an XLR and takes it right after the mic, the op amp, and the DAC, and sends it to a card slot to be recorded Dante or waves to something else. What I do on the input channel has no effect, and it never will. It's completely outside of the input channel's processing. So I'll give you a sort of a housekeeping example of why you may or may not want to do it. It's not good, bad, or right, or wrong. But let's say we're doing an input direct. We have the split set up for input direct I/O for a recorder. And I got a subsnake on the stage. My stage tech rings me up on the radio and says, hey man, the drummer just spilled a beer in XLR1. I got to change the kick drum. I'm going to plug it in XLR7. You got that? And I go, oh, okay. Let me go to that, the input channel of the kick drum. I'll change it from 1 to 7, right? Or what have you. Hit apply. And now that repatch, the input direct I/O follows the repatch. If it was a tie line, it'd still be looking at the beer-soaked XLR. So that's the difference. An input direct I/O is coming into a physical input channel and getting turned around. A tie line is just grabbing one socket and sending it to another. Most people will do recordings and digital splits on our consoles by way of tie lines, for better or for worse, because there's nothing that the front of house person is going to do that's going to mess with you other than gain. And if you have to tie line something that has not been programmed into an input channel, let's say you've got a bunch of, I don't know, IFB recorders, playback machines, I just want to get them in and going another direction. If they're not here for me to grab the gain to adjust, notice if I go over to inputs, notice if I tap that, oops, I need a local, there we go. If I tap 1, I know it's kind of hard to see on the screen here, up will come my mic pre 48 volt pad. You can scene recall safe that individually from there. So I still have access to the function of the XLR mic pre and DAC. It's kind of a little security thing. So tie lines, if you notice on this console, my audio is coming in by way of a Dante card on IO port 1, and I am tie lining it to IO port 2, where it's going to his S-Link port. If you poke around your IO screen, you're going to see the tie line go from S-Link port to IO port 1, where it goes to you. So I'm basically just showering you guys with audio with tie lines. You know, it could happen in perpetuity, but it's a cool little feature. The third thing about the IO grid here is a feature we added called virtual sound check. Do you do archival recordings of lectures or meetings in your facility? Okay, just stereo?
Yeah, just a stereo.
Okay, you don't need to multi-track. Most other people doing performance audio nowadays, multi-track recording is virtually free. I mean, in the old days, everybody knows who Robert Scovel is. He was the spokesman for Avid or Digidesign consoles. And he sort of coined the term virtual sound check, where he used to go out and take a $70,000 Pro Tool HD recording rig on the road. He would record a concert live. Wow, that's cool. And then go into the next venue later in the week or the next night. And rather than having the band come and sound check, he would leave them in the green room and he'd just play that concert back into the console. And he could mix it and make changes without the band being there. It would speed things up. It was a metric pain in the butt because and you could see him walk through the process of programming two totally different scenes. Actually, they're all the same except the source, but it was sort of kludgy. And have you ever done that on a Avid? No. You basically end up with two scenes. One of them is sourcing from the XLR racks. The other one is sourcing from the HD recording rig. We added a feature called virtual sound check where literally, not virtually, with one press of a button, let's say I declare that a recording card is in the back of my console in IO port 2, and I'm going to source the audio with one button push from the pre-recorded thing into the same scene of the same show file. Boom. Yep, I want to do. Basically what it'll do is interrupt your stage racks and just source from the card instead in the same scene of the same show file. It's a one button push thing. And nowadays with Dante Virtual Sound Card or SoundGrid on your computer, you can do sound check recordings and virtual sound check for free. I mean, everybody's used to it. It's virtual. And we just came out with an association with Harrison. You know what Tracks Live was from Waves? Remember the freeware? In fact, I still have it running here. Now Harrison, a sister company of ours, just came out with Live Tracks, which apparently is the same guy who made Tracks Live for Waves. It's now a new freeware that's sort of associated with Allen Heath. It's just a tape recorder. It's a capture playback utility. It's not a powerful. A what?
It's $15.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and you're asking me for a free license code. Talk to Harrison. They're not my product. They're a sister company that made a little, and you can use it with other stuff, but it's like what Tracks Live was. Every touring person used to have Tracks Live on a laptop, and they just archive every show and throw it on an outboard drive and, you know, make a concert recording later. I don't know.
Harrison software will also pull the name of the track from the board.
Yeah, which is cool. So that's sort of tied into that's one thing that's really helpful. However you label the console, it'll print the track names onto your file. It's a handy thing, you know. It used to be a 2-inch tape in a truck that cost $10,000 a day, right? So no more big giant cable trunks and free recording multi-track, you know. Gosh, not long ago, well, I won't tell the side stories. Anyway, you can now put this on a hotkey, by the way, which I think is a colossally dangerous thing. You know, I used to do these D-Live classes, and somebody would be like, wow, can I have that button here? I'm thinking, oh, really? You know, what if I hit the wrong one? Interrupt the show. Kaboom. It reminds me of Solo in Place. On the old big analog desks, they'd have like spring-loaded cap with teeth, you know. Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay.
It's a good soft key to put on one of the IP controllers.
I think on D-Live you can't now. We just added that like a firmware ago. You can have virtual sound check and record send armed on a soft key if you want. Oops, there we go.
But like, so you don't accidentally press it like when you're going to like get a monitor mix that you have programmed on the side.
Well, maybe it should be press and hold, right? Like the 48 volt. All right.
Sure, yes or no?
Yeah, do you want to do that? Well, it's interesting. This warning message came up by default. That's actually new. That never even used to be there. So that's an option somewhere. And by the way, you can, a little bit of tuning the behavior of this I/O grid. Remember options, looking for the little mystery gear in places. I can have confirm when reassigning warning be there or not. Let's turn it off. Do I want to press a patch button before I go there and make changes? Let's fat finger it. Oops. You don't have to follow me. I'm just going to show something kind of ridiculous. Yes, I want to see all 400 possible inputs. So if I go to inputs, I'm looking at the tabs across the top. There's 2 channels of USB. There's 128 channels of I/O port 2. There's 128 channels of I/O port 1. There's 128 channels of S-Link and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 channels of analog input. So that's a lot, right? And you don't want to accidentally run around and do this. So maybe it's a good idea to be warned. Let's give me a warning. I want a patch button, so I have to press a button to do anything, and I don't want to see all 400 things. Let's turn that off. So now, when I'm over on I/O port 2, I have to press a button, the patch button, before I can do these things, and it gives me a warning. I want to go through setup. Strip assign, soft keys, so anything under the control tab is going to be an attribute of the console, and we looked at some of these things, right? So my first soft key over here is programmed to be a mix button for a mono aux channel 1, which is why these are working. So I've programmed these soft keys. You can pull up a menu of a myriad of things that a soft key can be, including sort of individual scene pull-ups. If you want a unique state of operation for your meeting, like there's 6 people instead of 12, boom, I can have a soft key fire scene number 22 where the entire console is configured for whatever you want. It's not just rock and roll, you know, moving from one song to another. This is a means of mixing that, for when I was doing sound, didn't exist, right? And people get incredibly creative nowadays on how they do things. Under surface prefs, this is where I can completely defeat the sends feature. Like, aside from this, it will not mix sends on faders. I've like locked that feature off. Fortunately though, I can do sends on encoders anyway, but when I deselect it, that will always stay inputs mixing to mains. This is where I would program the individual 3 buttons down here. So I have the first one set up to be parametric control, the second one is set up to be gate and compressor, and the third one, you'll recall, was high pass filter. But it can be different things. You can have you know, AAM priority if in auto mixing. You can have channel levels. I think there's input direct IO levels. So there's a healthy little menu of things that you can have those encoders do at will. Your dimmer kind of controls, you know, if you're in a dark black box theater, or literally a dark theater, you want to dim the console down, that can be a saved attribute of your scene too. So I had to turn this touchscreen down because it was, you know, washing out things, right? So there we go. Anyway, you have 6 out, including taking the armrest. I don't know if you saw that original slide, and making it indigo, if you want to make it an aid in lighting up paper. This is programming the DCA spills. Notice this spill active I have associated with the last hotkey button. So that's just something I wanted to have on my demo file. And you can have an individual DCA spill onto the whole surface, the left side, the right side if you want. You can tell it to be an MCA where it's doing sends to a particular bus, which would be helpful for a monitor person. Custom rotary are the 3 little encoders on the side. Right now I have them set up for compression, threshold, and gain on both sides of the screen, but I could have them be gate control. I can have it be a high pass filter, it could be a preamp. Cancel. What is that? Pop out scene list? Oh, that's new. What is that? Ah, that is a cool new feature. Look at that. That must, so I can see my scenes, which you would see here, right? So you have a little miniature case of the scenes that comes out with it. Never seen that before. Told you it's been a while. Bear with me. Let's look at the audio tab and see what's under it. So this manages your PFL, your mute, your PFL, your select features, and the mix buttons. as an ex-monitor person, I have these set up so that the PFL, the select, and the mix button all fire at once. 1, 2, 3. Because if I'm at the side of the stage and I want to be hustling through people's inputs or buses, I PFL it. I want it to pre-select it for something I'm working on, and I want the sends on fader to come to me in case I need to make changes. So I stitch them together here. This is also where you can, your mains to PFL volumes, left and right levels you can set, etc. Solo in place is a feature that we also added to be fired off hotkeys. I think it's phenomenally dangerous, but okay. What's in the I/O port? This is telling me there's a Dante card in version 3, and that has a Fibrous card. Metering section, this is kind of weird. This is something that came with SQ. I almost don't want to spend time on some of these out in the weeds things, but you can tune the behavior of your meters. Like you can make it turn red at -12. So somebody's turning it up, they're like, oh no, I'm clipping, but that's what it's showing them. You can kind of change the metering behavior. Source selector, that's going to be, did I mention about the IP1 being a source selector?
Not in this session.
So actually it's pretty relevant, particularly in an installed environment. This little guy can be in a room like this with ceiling speakers and be tied into the main performance venue. Let's say it's a cry room or a green room, and I can press it, select the theater, turn the volume up and down in my ceiling speakers because I've got bus audio routed here, so it's going to control the aux send feeding this room, and it can scroll between 20 sources. So yeah, I'm done with church today or whatever. Boom, I'll go to the game and listen to XM because it's on the screen for me. So you can choose between 20 sources on here. The other thing it does is it fires up to 20 different presets. So that scenario that I was explaining, like a lecture custodial mode, you may want to have one of these on the wall where it's like, okay, Thursday night, Dr. Rob lecture, boom, it fires preset, you know, scene number 65, and that scene has the mains defeated, the front fills trickling in, you know, everything else tweaked however I want, and I want 8 channels of control on this. Essentially what it does is it fires between 20 scenes, or it could serve as a source selector for 20 different sources piping into these ceiling speakers. That's an IP1. On an AHM, it actually does even more, but we're not talking about AHM today. And this is where I would drop my sources in that I want to be automatic mics. Do you use the auto mixers? You do. Do you do gate-based or gain sharing?
Gate-based.
Okay, managed meeting, right? You can cut our auto mixer up into, it can be one giant 64-channel mixer, it could be 2 32s or 4 16-channel auto mixers. So a soft partitioned environment could have separate buckets of channels submixing to different places without affecting one another. Small feature. We already talked about configuration. Your talkback button can fire to different wedges and ears. Most monitor people nowadays will probably just use a regular input channel like I used to and still do. And I just talk to different buses rather than using a press button talkback feature, but it is in DLive and Avantis. You can create mute groups and have those mute groups live on the hotkeys, right? And I think there are 8 different mute groups that you can make. That was the original programmable feature of analog consoles, to have mute groups, which burgeoned into scenes. I can fire signal generators and then my controllers. The IP controllers, this is kind of neat. If you have any interest in these, you can actually, I don't have one hooked up to this console, but this is where I can program all the buttons. Remember I said any button can be anything? I'm going to tap the bottom. Oops, I got to go and... I can tell that button to be a mute. I'm pretty sure somewhere you can make it a tap sync to affect the tap tempo. Every button on those IP controllers can be programmed into what you want them to be. It doesn't just have to be mute PFL or mute mix or what have you. All the buttons on the side could be doing pretty sophisticated preset programming of your rig if you want it to be. And then if you go to simulation mode, I can actually, notice I'm kind of running the console. I can be reaching out and running these things either with Director or the console itself. Those may be scattered, the little IP1, they may be scattered around the building. Somebody's wondering why they're hearing the ball game when they should be hearing the theater. I can reach into that IP1 from Director or the console and make the change for them by going into simulation mode. Let's talk about meters. A monitor person would want to have at least all of their people on ears and wedges, you know, in a unique state of metering that they can call up and look at individually. So you have all input meters here. You have all possible effects meters there. Here are my output mixes. Those are all of them in totality. But I just want to make ones for me. I'm the monitor guy tonight, and I want to see the people on wedges and ears. What you do is you go into options. Again, here's a little gear. And I pull up this screen that allows me to drag things down. So there's the meter of one thing. I'm going to add a spacer. Here's the meter of another thing. I'm going to add a spacer. Oops, put it in between. There we go. Third thing, spacer. The point being, I can come up with a custom little observation point. So if I go over to mix, I want to look at people's ears. I thought in DLive you could block select these, but I guess not. So there's 4 buses. Let's put a spacer in between everything. Yep. And one more. So boom, I hit apply. And now I close that. And when I choose user 1, there I've got, you know, the custom metering items that I want to see. The RTA can operate in, here, let's go to a channel that's got something going on. There we go. So we're observing the mains bus right now. I can look at a sonogram image. I can look at bar activity of the RTA, or I can look in sort of a blobby line, and you have peak holds that can be represented and held there. I think that looks cool, but most people, if you're going to get into that level of observation of sonic impact, you're going to have smart and $10,000 omnidirectional mic in the room, right? But it is there. Yep. Ganging is an opportunity for you to strap channels together and attributes of the channel. You know, you can make odd, even stereo pairs all over the console, but I can't take channel 5 and make it pair with channel 15. What if I want to do that? Or what if I've got a bunch of lavaliers that I all want strapped onto one fader, so when I EQ one, I EQ them all, or I mute one, I mute them all. You can do some of these things with DCAs, but you certainly can't control the signal processing of those individual things assigned to a DCA. So if I go to inputs and I choose 1, 2, 3, 4, and I hit apply, now these 4 faders are all together now. And look what happens when I go to EQ. Oops. So they're all changing together based on the attributes that I tied together here, right? Maybe you just want fader and mute to be strapped together. Oops. And I hit apply. Now, the EQ is not affecting the others, but the fader and mutes are tied together. You can have 16 instances of ganging things. Why some people may want to do this, or they could make, like, let's say you've got 5 mics over congos and toys and stuff, like a little percussion rack. You know, I'm mainly gathering it with overheads with a little bit of complement from other things. I can have 4 mics gang together, come over here, swap these 3 off the console to save myself some top deck fader space, or just bury them somewhere else. And now I've got 1 mic that's going to do not only level, but signal processing for a gang of mics. Again, maybe a bunch of lectern mics you want to do that with, or I don't know, it depends. I think that's a bad example because, you know, I am a very loud, deep-voiced person. Enrico is a very gentle, high-voiced person. You wouldn't want us, hey! All right, ganging, 16 instances of things that can be strapped together and ganged. Talked about metering, talked about the I/O screen. The routing screen is kind of self-evident. Something I didn't mention, this is kind of neat, particularly if you're ringing out wedges. Let's go to signal processing of that NEQ. So I mentioned how we have an additional 12 bands of graphic. However, if I'm just using a graphic EQ, I can drop the faders on the deck, right? The bus that I had that I'm working on gets pushed over to the end, and here it is, right? I'm PFLing it now, so I see RTA activity not only up there above the EQ itself, but also onto the individual frequencies down here. I can create an EQ curve. We've all seen that before, right? What about these? Where are they? Why isn't, what? Well, I don't have 28 faders worth of fader available to drop a 28 band graphic EQ on it, so I have to tap it twice. Notice when I go to fader flip, it basically just moved the curve over. So now I can't control the, so I'm looking at it in two chunks, in other words, right? I want to copy and paste this EQ. It's just like I did on other channels. You know, when I was showing that on input, I hit copy, boom. Let's get rid of fader flip, oops. Go to a different bus, hit paste, boom, and it just gave the same curve onto all of these. So you have the opportunity to do fader flip and drop the graphics on the deck. Lord forbid you forget that that's how your console is in a state of operation, right? Well, just saying. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Drummer wants more what? Ouch. Okay. Okay, utility. This is a housekeeping measure. This is something I usually forget. Kind of wrapping up how you're running the show file. The good practices is when you are working on a scene or scenes, you definitely want to, store it. And that will save it within the show file, but then you got to go to utility, memory, and hit overwrite. It will not be permanent unless you hit overwrite. If I hit recall right now, it's just going to reload the show file, undoing everything I just did. So that's kind of a best practices thing. Are you using user profiles, by the way, to lock people out of things?
No, I'm not. Should I be?
You can. It's actually something I forget to talk about. You can have an administrator who has the keys to the kingdom, and then if you have other people under you who are not terribly knowledgeable, and you want to restrict them from chunks of the console, you go to config, user profiles. The administrator, you set yourself a password, so every time you walk up to the console, you unlock it. Or you can have a user who has their own password, and when they log in, you have previously set permissions for what they're allowed to do. Like, for example, the first thing you'd want to lock out is the ability to EQ outputs. Right? Because your room is dialed in. Nobody should ever mess with output EQs. But if you want to keep them from making memory saves, you don't want to have them overwrite your stuff, you can lock them out of that. If you go through these tabs, you can keep them from making patch changes. You can make it just a fade or mute machine if you want.